But I'm going to pop in, actually, Jennifer, if you don't mind, pop in that link for all of our partners into the chat. That way everybody on the call can take a look. We have incredible partners who really, like Zebra Technologies, I mentioned, is our presenting sponsor, but all of the partners who came together today are why we were able to have an event like this. So I highly recommend that you check them out. There's the link, it just came on live. So Zebra Technologies, of course, but there is a collection of other sponsoring partners. The Material Handling Education Foundation, their Richard Dilling Fund actually contributed, so check them out. Avanti Wavelink, Dewforms, Honeywell, Ingram Micro, Geotab, Bluestar, Impinj, DataLogic, ScanSource. All of these companies have joined up with Barcoding and Zebra to bring you this day. So I highly recommend checking them out. And the most important thing that we were able to do together, which is my segue, is this collection of companies, as part of Supply Chain Geek Day, we're able to put aside some of the monies that we gathered to donate. And so to be able to kind of put our money where our mouth is and contribute back to essential workers and people who are out there doing the hard work of making sure that the supply chain is running smoothly and that people are able to get what they need. So here in the United States, we were able to contribute to the American Logistics Aid Network. Alan, if you're familiar, if you're friendly, you can call him Alan. And then also in Canada, the Food Banks Canada, so their special appeal for the COVID-19 Response Fund. So we were able to donate to both organizations as part of Supply Chain Geek Day. So if you haven't been able to go on the site and check it out, please feel free to do so. Everybody is listed here, and you can kind of come here and check those guys out. All right, so we're about 5 minutes out. So if you need to go on the East Coast, go get your lunch, refill your coffee, take a break. Kathy here has joined me. Welcome, Kathy.
Hey, Jody, it is great to be with you today. And before we, kind of dive into our conversation, I want to say a huge thank you from Alan, from our board, from our partners, from all of the nonprofit organizations that we support for your gift. Because I know we set, a huge goal and then exceeded that by, let me go with my geek, like 22% just from the outset. So it's so incredible to have that generous contribution. So thank you guys for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And for everyone who's coming online or is still online with us right now, you're going to get to hear all about Alan. If you're not familiar with him, and if you are, you're going to get to spend some valuable time with their executive director. So stay tuned for that. So I'm going to say, looks like we've got all of the questions and whatnot that we need to get done. I'm going to make an executive decision that we're just going to jump right in. Why not? Why not? Go ahead and get started. So again, if you're just tuning in, this is Jody Costa. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Barcoding Incorporated and Barcoding Canada. And I have with me here Kathy Fulton from the American Logistics Aid Network. Kathy, do you want to go ahead and quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I serve as the Executive Director of the American Logistics Aid Network. It's a position that I have been in since 2014. Prior to that, I was the Operations Director for the organization, and prior to that, I did a little bit of Geek technology, running a portion of the IT department for Saddle Creek Logistics, which is a third-party logistics company, nationwide third-party logistics organization. So been around the supply chain world for a while now, let's just say.
So you are well versed in the language that's been spoken in the last two sessions, for sure.
Yeah, I have tons of notes about, I need to make sure that we're following up on that, or that's a cool technology we need to think about.
Yeah, so. Well then, now you have all these partners who are on board, right? So I'll have to hit
that's right.
after Supply Chain Day is over.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, I know that we have just from our briefly getting to know each other through this initiative. There's a lot that we can cover right now. I'm pretty excited about it. But I ended one conversation with David Flynn with what makes you a supply chain geek. I kind of want to start this one off because I think that your history in the space is very interesting, and kind of what you do right now is fascinating, I think, for the people on the call.
Sure. So, I don't know where to start with what makes me a supply chain geek, because I feel like I've been one my entire life. But just to rewind a few years, I actually did my undergraduate work in mathematics, and not knowing anything about it at the time, my senior thesis was on least cost routing. I didn't know what that meant. And it was, at a time when we were really thinking about it from a telecommunications perspective. Boy, I wish I had actually understood the implications of what least cost routing really meant way back then. But being a supply chain geek for me is everything about the space. Just loving everything about the partners we get to work with. I can drive down the road and see a logo on the side of a truck and think, oh, they did that case. They supported that case for the tornado in Tennessee or something like that. But it's about solving problems as well. I mentioned, that degree in math, and I think anybody who's, crazy enough to tackle a degree in math has to really enjoy being a problem solver. And I'm fortunate that at Allen, I get to kind of do that day in and day out. I get to, build a puzzle, it seems like, we get a problem, and then we have to find craft a solution around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, I have so many questions around being a math major, but I'm not going to go there. I would love if there may be a few folks on the call who aren't as familiar with what Allen, stands for and what you guys have been able to do. So maybe just give us a quick overview of the organization.
Yeah. So Allen stands for American Logistics Aid Network. It's just easier, less of a mouthful to say Allen. And we support the nonprofit community with pro bono logistics solutions. And that can mean anything from transportation or material handling equipment, Zebra was talking. I know that they've been, in the past, made donations to support food banks of retired equipment, helping to connect the dots, helping, like I said, build the puzzle. But specifically work around disaster and crisis. So, it's anything from a tornado that hits to the past 6 months of dealing with the COVID crisis. We're working with the nonprofit community, understanding what their logistics challenges are, and then going to the business community and asking them to support it. We talked a little bit about language, the language of geeks and whatnot. Oftentimes our job is translator. So, we're working with, a situation came up earlier in the week where someone used an acronym, and my translator in my brain is going, okay, is that what they mean in the nonprofit lingo, in the government lingo, in the business lingo? Because it's, and then Allen gets to bring all of those worlds together because in crisis, logistics is the most important thing that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that a lot of what Allen has dealt with over the years, I just imagine it's, kind of natural disaster related items, but, the current world, I mean, it had, I don't know about you, we had not planned for a global pandemic, and I think we were not alone. So kind of what has it been like for you guys since March or April or February when this really started to kind of hit hard in the States?
Yeah. So, it has been like everybody else, a scramble. Really, there's no other way to describe it. And I'll talk about, most of our work is around coordinating for the nonprofit community, but there are some other things that we've done during the past 6 months that are probably as important. And so, I'll start by saying I'm an optimistic person, but this has been a really, really tough time. And I think we all kind of feel that way. We're all sitting at homes or, offices not close to one another right now. For someone who's an introvert extrovert, it's tough, right? But so some of the things that we've been doing. So even just yesterday, I was working with a group who has test kits that they need to send to Kenya, right? And so that is a cold chain logistics across, from Salt Lake City to Kenya, right? That's not a small request. We also have been working a lot with food banks, right? So when you look at unemployment numbers, the demand on food banks has increased. I'm not going to say exponentially because I'm a math person, I know that, but it's 2, 3, 4-fold. Just as there's been more of a draw for those services. And so they need things like equipment to help make them more efficient, whether it's conveyors, whether it's cold storage, right? So the number of requests that we get for refrigerated trailers or for conveyors or even just boxes, right? People don't think about the box, but it is probably, right?
It's like, well, of course, but.
It is probably the most important piece of logistics and supply chain that we have, anywhere. But those boxes are being used to build food kits because people obviously can't go into food pantries now, so they have to pick up. You think about the challenges that retail is having with, either the curbside pickup or the home delivery. Food banks are having to figure out those same logistics challenges, but they're doing it on a much smaller budget, less people, and backwards and in heels, as they say. But one of the other things that we've been working on, in addition to kind of all that nonprofit support, is really helping the business community understand not just the virus, because you can get information about the virus from a myriad of sources, pick your channel, but really about also the non-pharmaceutical interventions that governments have put in place to slow the spread of the virus. And those interventions don't just slow the spread of the virus, but unfortunately sometimes they have a negative effect on our supply chains. I'm thinking about, we have this tri-state mandate right now, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, whichever one it is. I apologize. I meant to look it up and I'm like, but you have to self-quarantine if you're coming in from, like I live in Florida. If I were to go to New York or New Jersey right now, I have to self-quarantine for 14 days. What does that mean for a truck driver who is moving a load of produce from Florida to that area, right? There are waivers, and theoretically it doesn't apply to them, but even just figuring all of that out for a business to say, okay, are we affected by that or not? And to have that essential worker letter or whatever it may be in the truck with them, somebody has to deal with all of those requests, and it's a time suck. So helping businesses navigate that, we set up a technology platform because at heart I'm a geek, but it's called the Supply Chain Intelligence Center. You can find it on our access to it on our website, but it lists all of the policies and protocols that have been put in place by states that could possibly either inhibit the flow of supply chains or enable them. So things like waivers, weight restriction waivers, and if you're hauling medical equipment, those types of waivers are also available on our website. So a lot.
Yeah, and that website
we've been doing a lot.
If you're listening in and you're like, I need that myself, that website link is in the chat. So you can get to Alan's site just from popping over in there. I mean, it's so complicated. I know that even for barcoding, figuring out our response around both the United States and Canada with our different offices, what is regionally appropriate, what's, trying to figure out what's necessary and what's not, is complicated enough. And so I imagine that on a larger scale, it's got to be pretty tough. And that's probably what makes it a little less comparable to some of the other natural disasters that you've worked on.
Yeah, a little bit. So, there are still requests for our services, right? Nonprofits still need equipment, and they still need transportation, and they still need, warehousing. But instead of that being isolated to a particular geography, it's not just, Florida's been hit by another hurricane. It's the entire U.S., plus their global supply chains, plus dealing with workforce issues. I think one of the panelists earlier talked about, protecting their workforce and ways to do that, the proximity sensors and proximity monitoring and things like that. But that all goes to, kind of these workforce challenges. And so when you look at what businesses are dealing with absenteeism, or with workers who may get sick, or fear of coming to work, nonprofits are dealing with those same challenges, right? So I would say that 90% of our volunteer workforce is age 60 or older. Immediately puts them into a higher risk category, right? But they're retired, they have time. But that also means that maybe they're afraid of, or they're being restricted from going and volunteering at their local food bank or soup kitchen or whatever it may be. So the role of the role of technology in being smarter about, how are you planning your activities? How are you how are you running your logistics operations? I mentioned conveyor a couple of times. Are there things that you can do to rapidly improve your throughput, just like businesses are having to deal with? And again, I'm not going to dwell on it, but backwards and in heels.
I like that, because, we're a couple of supply chain geek ladies here, so we talk backwards and in heels.
That's right.
Well, can you talk about maybe where we are right now? How is everyone faring out there in terms of the current state of the pandemic? Yeah. So, where are we now? We're still in the first wave, but as I like to remind people, waves are not, static. They don't immediately hit and regress, right? So they kind of roll in. So this one is still rolling up the beach, unfortunately, and it's rolling into areas that were not hit very hard in March or April. It was the denser urban areas that kind of took the brunt of this at the beginning, and now we're seeing more rural areas. I kind of monitor the case counts in my area, and they have they've started to really increase just over the past 10 days. So what does that do to our supply chains, right? It puts strain and stress on them, because I talked about workforce. But there's also this increased demand, right? Excuse me, an increased demand. I don't know why toilet paper was the early thing to go. But I do know that things like personal protective equipment, right? Those supply chains were pushed to breaking, right? We had to stand up new sources of manufacturing in order to support the demand, and we're still not there yet.
So supply chains are, some of them are in this period where they're trying to figure out, okay, can we take a breath? Can we, we've dealt with kind of the early things. Some of them are still, as they're bringing people back to work and dealing with these new challenges, they're just they're learning how to live with the virus. Supply shock, demand shock, all at once. We're all just, people say the new normal or the next normal. It is just, I don't think it's normal at all, but it is what we're dealing with, right?
Yeah, I think we tossed the word normal out when 2020 happened. We're just like, there it goes.
Yeah.
Life does go on and the world keeps spinning. Even though we are still dealing with COVID, there are obviously a lot of other factors that are coming into play and other disruptors that could happen within people's supply chains. So, do you have any advice out there for kind of our audience? I mean, I think you alluded to a little bit of it, right? But maybe just summarizing some of that advice for geeks out there trying to prepare.
Actually, I will say, if you can find time for self-care, take advantage of it, right? Whatever, I was having a conversation a few weeks ago with someone, and I said, it's okay to not be okay right now. Because this is not normal for any of us. It is crazy times. But you still have to take care of your businesses, right? So there's this great article by a friend and coworker of mine, a gentleman named Phil Palin, and that was actually in the Supply Chain Quarterly, DC Velocity Supply Chain Quarterly in February. It's called 7 Steps to Counter, I wrote it down so I got this one right, 7 Steps to Counter Catastrophe. In it, he talks about kind of figuring out a way to bound your problem, whether that's geographically or, whatever that may mean. How do you bound your problem? You gather your data, you map your flows, you assess the potential impacts. So all of these things that, we talked about data in the first conversation this morning. We have lots and lots of data now. So what can you go back and assess from the last 3 months and use to make a plan for what's next? I'll also say, and I'm going to sound really, really geeky saying this, but I spoke at CES this year. It's probably the geekiest thing I've ever said in my life. But all of that mapping that Phil talks about in his article really reminded me of, on a more micro level, building a digital twin of our supply chains, right? We have all this data. Let's build that representation, that digital representation, so we can see these impacts, so that we can, we can really assess. We can break things digitally that we can't break in real life and see what happens elsewhere. And I think personally, having done exercises and tabletops and all of that back when I was running IT and, through the last 10 years, you're going to find actual ways to improve your day-to-day operations when you do that, not just your crisis operations. And then my last piece of advice about, what's next, how to deal with murder hornets or whatever is coming, be flexible, right? You're never, ever going to get everything right. And so just be willing to make the mistake, recover from it, and move on.
That's really good life advice, I think. Yes, I'm desperately hoping that there's no murder hornets or anything else.
I know.
Please stay away from murder hornets. Well, we do have a question.
Storms.
Not related to murder hornets, but it's how do nonprofits get in touch with Alan if they are interested in receiving some support? Yeah.
So that's actually a great question. On our website, we have request forms that actually collect all of that information. You can go on there, or our contact form, that allanaid.org. Either way, put in your request for whether it's transportation, warehousing, equipment, expertise, whatever that need is. Send that to us. We have this incredible team of volunteers that will, take the request, get in touch with you, figure out, is there a potential to find a solution for this, and then work through that puzzle and that solution.
Yeah, well, I guess the flip side of that too is that, there's a lot of companies on this call who may have services, items, space that they could use to help. Same thing, same process for them to get involved?
Yep, absolutely. There's a form on our website. You can see the cases that we have open right now. Just on the website, you can see like the request for transportation or warehousing, whatever. But if there's something, if you don't see a case there that matches what you need right now, there's also a form to say, hey, contact me in the future because, I may be able to offer you warehouse space or may have transportation that's, that we can provide. And we're looking for donations for these things. I'll say that, flat out. And I know that's sometimes hard for companies who are looking, everybody is stressed and strained right now, especially in the current environment. But if you have that capacity or you think you may have it in the future, let us know. Allen is about opportunity, not obligation. So I'm not going to hold you to that. I recognize that things change in people's businesses. Just because you have capacity now doesn't mean tomorrow you'll have that same capacity. So we just want the opportunity to have the conversation with you.
That's awesome. And I hope that, for the audience that's listening, please take a look at the site. I mean, it was something that I think I discovered you guys through MHI. So we've been MHI members for a while, and I know that they support your efforts. So for those who are, it's a really interesting organization. They do a lot of really great work, and there's a lot of ways to get involved. I think a lot of times companies like ours, when we have CSR, corporate social responsibility ideas, it's often just like, I would like to give money, which we did, which is awesome. You like the money too, right? So, which is great, but sometimes it's nice to be able to put your own personal talent or, assets, I guess, on the line to help out in catastrophe. So it's a really cool thing for all of us supply chain geeks out.
Yeah, and employee satisfaction is a big thing. I'm the mother to a, I don't know, Zoomer. I don't know exactly which generation she falls into. She's kind of on the line between millennial and Zoomer. But we find that generation really wants to be engaged, right? The number of our volunteers who are younger now is really fascinating to watch, because they're saying, I went to school, I have these skills, I can't get a job right now, so maybe let me volunteer with you. So it's really, it's kind of cool to watch. But I say that to say, those people are also sitting in your offices right now, and they want to use the skills that they're using to make you a profit to make a difference for the world.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. And I've done actually a good amount of research in this area. And so if you out there have not, there's incredible statistics around employee retention in terms of giving back. And so whole topic for another day.
Yes.
But I do want to kind of, we're slowly running out of time here. I know we have a lot of stories to cover, but I kind of wanted to see if you wanted to share, you've seen probably all sorts of things happening over the course of your career, but any successes that have really stood out to you where you're like, gosh, that hit the mark.
Yeah. What's really interesting is we see, even in the past 6 months, we've had these huge donations that have flowed through us. We have one organization right now that we'll be able to talk more about next week that has basically donated probably 40 truckload moves of pet supplies, right? Just like people need food, their animals, we don't want their animals to be hungry either. so there are the companies out there who are doing, kind of huge donations like that. But there are also companies who small, I don't want to say small because there's no small donation, but, maybe lower cost donation is having a huge impact. So like we had a group in Falls Church, Virginia, just recently. They had a food giveaway. And so this group they serve maybe 200 families a week, even before the crisis started, just giving away food boxes. Well, they wanted to do kind of this one-day drive, and they had offers of like milk and eggs and all of these things that needed to be refrigerated. But they don't have a big freezer at their facility that, and so we paired them with a group who had said, hey, we have a refrigerated trailer if anybody needs it, wants to take advantage of it. Really low cost donation for that company. But that organization served 1,100 families in one day. So 5.5 times what they were able to do in a week prior, and they were able to do it just in one day. So it's not about, the cost to the business, but the impact that has on the community. So I have hundreds of stories like that. And that's one of the really cool things of working where I work. If I haven't said it yet, I'll say it now. I have the best job in the world, because in crisis, people, we can moan about not having toilet paper on our shelves or, whatever. But the reality is there are lots of businesses out there who are really doing good things with their supply chains. They're force multipliers, and they're making a difference. They're using what they have to make life better for others. It's really cool.
I mean, if you're out there and you're not inspired right now, I can't help you. That's exactly why it's so much why we wanted to set aside a day to celebrate people like yourself, who are out there applying your skills and your talents to something that's so critical. I mean, it is maybe somewhat something that up until now people kind of didn't think about. It was what's supply chain, like an everyday, person, just things just arrive. They just come to my door, right? Now the pandemic has really highlighted the fact that this is an incredible effort, right? And it's a coordinated effort, and it is very cool. I am very thankful that an organization like yours exists. So
and it takes geeks to make it happen, right? Quite honestly, right? It is people who want to solve problems. It's people who are willing to dig in. It's people who are willing to, to say, okay, these 5 companies can't do this, but maybe the 6th one can, right? And so it's just that geekiness that comes along with like loving environments where you don't have a lot of information, or loving environments where you can really use your skills to make a difference. So
loving the challenge,
it's a lot of fun.
Loving the problem.
Yeah, it is. The problem. Yeah, it's loving the problem for sure.
Well, that's why I'm going to end with a question that you didn't think I was going to ask you, but I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and ask you what your favorite kind of math is.
My favorite kind of math. What's really funny is all the work that I do now is probably, somewhere buried in there is calculus and stuff like that. But my favorite kind of math was actually like non-planar, non-linear, math, where we're looking at alternate dimensions, and we're, I know it is so incredibly geeky. But,
yes, I knew it was going to be a good answer. I did.
But I mean, even just dealing with like the history of like, what were these guys? I don't even know. What were they on when they dreamed up, this type of mathematics? So it's not a skill that I exercise as much as I once did, but I'm glad to have that in my background.
Yes. So hopefully that's not my homework assignment, I don't want to go out and learn nonlinear math. But perhaps our next speaker might actually be very interested in nonlinear math. Kevin, I see that you're on, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll doing a transition. Are you a big math fan too? I assume you are.
Actually, I'm not. I say my favorite type of math is the math that someone else has done for me.
Well, there you go. You and Kathy are a perfect pair. Jennifer and I are English majors, so we don't know anything about math.
All right. Thanks so much, Jody.
Thank you, Kathy.
Awesome.
Bye, guys. See
Awesome
ya.
conversation.